Hello and welcome to today's video. Today I'm reviewing a pen from Wingsung, one of the traditional Chinese pen brands. It is this model. It is the 630. This is one of the more luxurious Wingsung pens I've had the opportunity to look at. It's got a lot going for it. It's obviously modeled off another pen brand and one of the larger sizes from that pen brand. But I'm going to look at this today. I'm going to talk about the parts and features, independent of those other brands. Just talk about what you get with this pen, and do a writing sample and pros and cons. So, starting at the top of the pen, a plain black cap, nothing on that cap whatsoever. Gold ring there, or gold colored ring with the clip on it. The clip is not too bad. It's okay. It's worked well. The cap swells out to this center band here, where you get 3 gold colored bands. 2 thin ones with a large one in the middle that has Wingsung 630 made in China there on the cap band. Then it'll taper down, you get onto the barrel of the pen, which continues along and then starts to taper. You get to a gold ring and then the piston turning knob. This is a piston filling pen, so I won't activate it because there's ink in the pen, but you turn that knob when the nib is in a bottle of ink, and it pulls and it descends a little piston mechanism in the pen and draws up ink. It is a screw cap pen and it comes off in about 1 1/4 turns. No step down, but a couple of very smooth threads and a nice chunky section there. Not a long section, but it is nice and thick. It's got a tiny little flare on the end there as well. And then you get this beautiful large 2-tone nib on this. The nib is branded with branding reminiscent of another brand, including the Wingsung logo there. And then you get a nice big plastic feed. As I said, it is a piston filling pen, and in this light it's hard to see, but there's some ink windows around here, which are very usable. They give you a good indication of the amount of ink that's in the pen, and I like the fact that they're sort of the cutout style reminiscent of another brand. The Wingsung 630 does post, and it posts quite securely. It makes for a longish pen. It's definitely on the longer side. The cap is in a nice position and isn't too sort of sharp on your hand there or anything. It's just a fairly decent sort of pen, and feels quite nice in the hand, both capped and uncapped. So that is the basics of the Wingsung 630. It's a large pen. It's quite a luxurious pen for Wingsung, and I think it's got a lot going for it in its own right. Size comparison now alongside the Lamy Safari and the Jinhao X159, another of these larger Chinese pens that are modelled off another brand. So you can see it's about the same size as the X159, which are both longer there than the Lamy Safari when they are capped. Uncapped, there's not a huge amount of difference between the Lamy Safari and these other pens. I will say though that the Wingsung nib here actually ends up slightly longer than the Jinhao X159 number 8 size nib, because of its being slightly not quite posted quite as deeply, and it makes for a nice size pen in the hand. But a lot of the other proportions and even some of the features, like a slightly matte coloured, flare on the end of the section, are mirrored in the Jinhao pen. When it's posted, it comes out considerably longer than both of them. It's a nice size pen in the hand and a generous size pen. So what are the dimensions of the Wingsung 630? Well, 630. They are 150 millimeters when it is capped. Big pen. It's 135 when it is uncapped. Super size pen in the hand. Really, really great. Super comfortable. Good girth, good length. Posted, it is 171 millimeters, which might be too long for some people, and it might be slightly off balance. To me, it feels on the usable side at that length. The width of the section is 12.5 millimeters in the middle there, so chunky, and the pen at its widest point is almost 17 millimeters. So if you've got pen cases, make sure that this is the sort of pen that will fit in them. The pen weighs 33 grams, 22 in the body and 11 in the cap. So it's a nice weight when it is unposted, but even when it's posted, the balance still feels okay. Let's do the writing sample now with the Wingsung 630. This is a steel. It was listed as a 0.5 to 0.7 millimeter nib, which I'm counting as a medium, and it certainly writes like a medium. The ink is Mont Blanc Midnight Blue. Strategically chosen, and you'll understand why if you know the pen design. So the pen writes quite smooth, and I think it writes quite wet. It's certainly consistent. And it's remarkably smooth, and I think that's actually pretty wet. Reverse writing with this pen, not the best, quite smooth, but very faint, very fine. Quick writing. That was me not putting the nib on the page properly. That wasn't a skip. It writes well. It writes consistently. And actually, it's one of the few nibs that I've tried recently that if you want to, you can actually get a tiny bit of line variation out of it by gently applying a little bit of pressure. I think this nib writes well. It writes consistently. It writes quite wet. It's smooth. For a pen at this price point, I have to say I'm pretty impressed. So what are the pros and cons of the Wingsung 630? Okay, the elephant in the room, one of the cons is the fact that it is very clearly modelled off a pen from another brand. That is very clear. But you can decide whether that is something that you are okay with and if you want to get it. Once again, this is one of those pens that was suggested to me to review, and I purchased a number of these similar kinds of pens, and they're all modelled off other brands. That is just how they are. That is the Chinese market. You know, here is a number of them that I have on my desk right now as I'm writing. This is an odd one, but it took, even though it's a piston filler, when I filled it, it didn't write. There was no ink coming down to the nib at all. And I did all the usual tricks of priming the feed and everything. And you might get like half a letter onto the page, or if that, and nothing. And then all of a sudden it wrote fine. But the first like 3 or 4 hours, nothing. Testing it, you know, sort of like priming it, it just wouldn't write. So whether there was something caught up in the mechanism, like some machining oil or something, or, you know, I did fiddle around with like the positioning of the nib in the feed and all those kinds of things. So it might have just lined something up. I wasn't going about it in a scientific way or anything. I was just simply, you know, just fiddling around. But you actually see now that the nib is actually not entirely aligned on the feed there as it is. So, you know, they are affordable, some might say cheap, Chinese fountain pens. Quality control and that kind of stuff is not going to be the same as with some of the luxury brands that these pens are modelled off. So what is the price? Well, I got this for around the 60 Australian dollar mark, and you can get it on places like eBay, AliExpress, those kinds of websites. And obviously the price will vary depending on where you are and the postage rates and the, you know, the seller that you buy from and all those kinds of things. So look out for the cheaper prices if you can, because I think at this price point and below, this is an okay pen. As I said, when it's writing, it writes fairly well. And there are some pros with the pen that I quite like. I enjoy the size of the pen. You know, it's a good size. I said I kind of like the price. I love the feel in the hand. It's good. I like the fact that there are a few color options available. I went for something quite classic, but there are a couple of options. So look out for something that appeals to you. And I don't know if they'll introduce more color options as time goes by, but as it stands, there are a couple. And as I said, when the nib's writing, it writes pretty well. I've not had a huge amount to complain about. It just took a while to get there, but you're not paying more than $1,000 for this pen. You're paying $60 for this pen. So fiddle with it, get it working for you, and maybe you have a pen that you really enjoy. As I said, I like writing with it. I like the feel of it in my hand. I like the feel of the nib on the page. So yeah, it's got, in its own right, it's got some things going for it, but are they in its own right? That's up to you to decide. So this was the Wingsung 630. I hope you found this video interesting and useful. Please like and subscribe, hit the notifications button, all of that kind of stuff. If you've got products you think I should be looking at, or if there's a way you would like to support the channel, I would love to hear from you. In the meantime, enjoy your pens at whatever price point they come, and I'll talk to you soon.